Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Odd and Untold. This is episode 26. Really excited this week. I have on a guest that I've been wanting to speak to for a long time. We've been Facebook friends for a long time. I've been following her group, Gayle Beatty. And Gail, thank you for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me,
Oh, of
Jason.
course. And I know I reached out to you a while ago, 6, 7 weeks ago, maybe. And I know you were very busy. So I do appreciate you coming on the show. I know you were saying off air that you're getting a lot of reports. And so before we get into any stories and current reports, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and how it came to be?
Okay. Well, I had an encounter when I was a teenager. I grew up in the town of Pine Plains, New York, which is in Dutchess County, about 2 hours north of Manhattan. And we moved there in the 60s. And I was camping one night by myself. I used to always be in the woods. I rode horses, I hunted, I fished. We lived on a lake. And one night I decided to go solo camping up on the mountain at my favorite spot where I would always be. And so it started to get dark, and I heard this owl, and it was a loud owl call, and it was a little bit raspy, and I don't know, just something odd about it. So I was alone, so I said, okay, don't worry, it's just an owl. And then all of a sudden, this yell, scream, howl, like that shook my chest. I mean, it was unbelievably long and frightening, and nothing that I'd ever heard before. And I was terrified. I froze, and I felt the blood just drain out of my body, and I just felt like if I don't get out of here, this thing is going to get me. So I got up enough nerve, and I just bolted out of the tent and slid down the steep ravine that I had to climb up to get there, and burst into the house. And my parents were like, where were you? What's the matter? Because I was crying, and I said, there's something up on the mountain and it's after me. So they're like, well, that's what you get for going up there by yourself, right? So anyway, that always stuck in my mind, but at the time I had never heard about Bigfoot. I might have heard about a Yeti, but I never imagined they could be around us, in New York. So um, I guess I just went on with my life, and, doing the things that I loved with nature and everything. And it was in, I think, 2011 when I was watching that show, Finding Bigfoot, that I was doing the dishes in the kitchen, and I heard that same yell, scream, howl, or whatever you want to call it. And I said, that is what I heard on the mountain that night. So I immediately went to my computer and Googled Bigfoot sightings in New York State or in the Hudson Valley. And the first one that came up was a daytime road crossing sighting by two women on the road that I lived on in
Oh,
Pine
wow.
Plains. So that was like, okay, this is crazy. So from then I went to different friends of mine that had farms, dairy farms, and just asked if they had had any, encounters, any animals missing or killed, or any unusual things happening on their property. And a friend of mine who recently passed away, he said, yeah, one night my niece was visiting from the city, and it was around 11 o'clock at night, and she got up to get a drink of water, and she looks in the picture window, and there's this huge man-like hairy face looking at her through the window. So she screamed, and they came running out of the bedroom, and he's getting a flashlight, and they looked around, and it had jumped off the back deck, and it was gone. And so from there, I started investigating the farm. I started a group, just a small group of us. And sure enough, we started finding evidence almost immediately in the form of a huge carcass of a cow that had disappeared. And my friend said, "Oh, I wondered what happened to that cow." And we found the whole entire carcass tucked under this bush. So we, took the bones and we showed him, and we tried to find the ear tag, but we couldn't. And then from there, other people started contacting me once I started the Facebook group and telling me of encounters that happened back in the 50s in the town of Pine Plains. And it just got bigger and bigger and more attention to the Hudson Valley itself because it's known for like paranormal activity, which I never knew. I've lived here for years, but I never knew that. So since then, I've got probably over 250 reports. So that's a lot of people. And I keep saying, oh, I'm going to write a book of all the encounters, but I have like pieces of paper and books stuffed everywhere. So one of these days I will. Yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah,
great.
that's
And yeah,
how
people don't really think of the Hudson River Valley as like Bigfoot, or New York for that matter. I mean, a lot of
right,
people, they just, or if they do, they're thinking like Whitehall. They don't
right,
think of the Hudson River Valley. And the Hudson River Valley is very famous for haunted houses. I mean, Legend of Sleepy Hollow, the Headless Horseman, and
right.
UFO flaps back in the 80s.
Yes,
Um, but a lot of people don't really necessarily think about it with Bigfoot. They think New York, they think skyscrapers, they think the city. They don't realize that New York is so much bigger than that. And then yeah, you get out of the city and you basically cross out of the Bronx into Westchester, and
right,
you go from huge apartment buildings to just woods
right.
very very quickly, and small towns. And
Yeah,
the Hudson River Valley is with the Catskills and all the little towns up there, very creepy and very very uh, habitable for a Sasquatch if it exists. And it's not just up in Whitehall, it's not just the Adirondacks, it's not just the Pacific Northwest. It could, there's a lot of habitat in the Hudson River Valley,
yes.
where it could live. So that's great. Um, so you started your group, you started getting lots of reports, and I know you guys are in the news up there a lot. Pretty
Yeah,
much every every sighting in that area. I see your name, I see your group's name. So
yeah.
that's great. So any particular stories that really stand out to you? I know there's a recent one. I mentioned it on last week's show because I was talking about some Bigfoot howls I had heard in the Hudson River
Oh,
Valley.
yeah, that was an incredible encounter you and your wife had.
Yeah, it was very interesting, and it was similar to like what you said. It like hit me in the chest, and her too.
Right.
It was something that, like, the best way I can describe it is like when you go to like a loud concert and the bass kind of kicks in or the drums kick in, and it's almost like just being hit in the chest. And
Yes.
people tried to tell us it was owls, it was this, it was that, and I'm like, there's no owl on earth big enough to make. And I've heard some creepy owls, up
Yeah,
in the Adirondacks and
yeah.
in the woods, and some of them sound like people being murdered, or they just sound unearthly. And then you're like,
Right.
oh, it was an owl because it flies away, or you're like, oh, okay, it was just an owl. But it's interesting that you said the same thing about like reverberating in your
Yes.
chest, that it seemed like something very big. But I did reference a recent story that you were involved in about some tracks in Poughkeepsie. So do you want to talk
Yes.
about that a little bit?
Yes, I can say a few things. I have to be careful, because of the location,
Of
and
course.
the witness was getting some negative feedback from her landlord.
Mm,
And so I had to remove the one photograph, but I kept the track picture on.
okay.
But yeah, that was last week, I guess. And she was out walking her dog, and she was on her phone, and the dog was doing its business. And it was probably a couple of 100 yards away is a street light on a corner, and then forest. And she happened to look up and look over at the street light, and she sees this enormous hairy creature standing there. And it must have realized that she had spotted it, and it just took like two big strides, and then it ran up into the woods. And she was like, what the heck did I just see? And she wasn't able to get a really close look at it, but she said it had like grayish hair or
Mm,
fur or whatever. And she found the track, I think it was last February or March, in the same area. So she's got to be careful, because of her living situation. So I'm kind of, I'm not pressuring her at all. And, she's going to keep her eyes and ears open and let me know if anything else happens. But
Right.
like, it got so much attention with the media, it always does because it's Poughkeepsie. I mean, this is the first account that I've had from Poughkeepsie itself, but I've had other reports from Peekskill, Wappingers Falls, Amenia, so many towns like surrounding us that it's incredible. So it shows me that they're coming closer and closer to human habitation. And I know that personally because I've had encounters on my own property. A friend of mine who was also a researcher with us dropped me off one night. We went to a jewelry show, and it was in August of 2016. And I live on the Sawkill Creek and Mill Pond and have a bait and tackle shop, and we rent rowboats and everything. And so she dropped me off. It was torrential rain. She backed up to turn around in the driveway, hit the front of our house, and there was this huge black Sasquatch that was crouched down in this little dip where I had this rose bush. And he jumped up and ran towards our point where our camper is. And she was like, "Oh my God, I just saw a Sasquatch right here." So she didn't tell me that night. She said, waited till the morning. She told me what happened. She came over and we walked down where she saw it run. We found a track, I think 17 or 18 inches. So we
Wow.
passed that and it was like, okay. And I've had other instances on my property as well. So I just kind of always, feel that if they were going to harm me, they would have done it by now. And I don't have the fear that I had like in the beginning because now, I've gotten more closer to them and different research times. And if they wanted to really harm us, they could have very easily. So I just assume that they're here and they might have been here before we got here.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And we should say too, because again, many listeners may not be familiar with the Hudson Valley and the wildlife that's there, but it's wild, it's forest, but the biggest animals we have up there are probably black bear and not
Yeah.
very big black bear. I mean, if they stood up, they're going to be 5, maybe 6 feet tall
Right.
on the bigger end. So it's not so easy just to dismiss and say, oh, you saw a bear. You saw a bear running on its hind legs for many yards, and it
Right.
was 8 feet tall or 9 feet tall, running bipedally. That's not really going to happen,
No
and we have coyotes, we have fishers, we have things that will make
noises. Yeah.
noises, horrifying noises. I mean,
Oh,
fishers can
yeah.
sound dreadful, and bobcats and things of that nature,
Foxes. Yeah.
foxes even.
Yeah.
But these are smaller creatures. These are not animals that are going to make a howl that is going to reverberate and hit
Right.
you in the chest like that. So as far as the sounds, as far as seeing things,
Mhm.
we don't have grizzlies out here. We don't have elk. I mean, I know there's moose further
Yeah.
north, like up in the
Occasional
Adirondacks. I don't know if
Yeah.
do you guys get a lot of moose sightings down
We've
down.
had my son actually got a picture of one last year, and then there was one seen locally this year, I believe. They're like a stray. I've never seen one in the wild, so they're very rare to see a
Right,
moose, but
right, especially this far south in the
oh
Hudson
yeah,
River Valley. I know even up in the Adirondacks, they're rare. They're when
yeah,
someone sees one, it's like a big deal because they're
yeah,
just not, really prevalent there.
yes,
Yeah. So, do you have any other stories you'd like to share?
Oh God, I have hundreds of stories, so I don't know where to start. All right, so I told you about my first encounter. Um, okay, so I'll tell you about a life-changing encounter for five of us.
Hmm.
So this was in the next town over. It's maybe 7 miles from my home. A gentleman contacted me and he had bought some property and had a house built. and he was dredging a pond. They had men there dredging a pond, and they left their machinery there one night, I guess the backhoe or whatever it was, and he heard something outside. So he stepped out on his porch, and in front of the machine, was standing on two legs, is this creature. So he immediately, being from the city and not really, knowing the wildlife, he thought it was a bear. So he ran in the house, closed the door. The next day, the guys came to, keep dredging, and they walked around the pond and were finding huge tracks, like 18 inches, 17 inches. And they said, "What kind of animal do you have around here?" And he looked at him, he's like, "Geez, these, I don't know." So then other things started happening at the house. I guess he had two stepdaughters, and they had a little dog, and his wife was there at the time when they were still married. And these creatures would come up and scratch on the screen, and
Hmm.
the kids like were terrified. And the other things that they punched out is motion lights, and they were finding he found a deer skull on his porch, and they were just messing around, right? So the wife ended up, she could not take it, and the kids, and they ended up separating, and she moved out. So then the activity ramped up even more. So when he contacted me, I was pretty new to the whole thing. So I said, "Oh, sure, we'll come out." And I think I went alone the first time, and there was just so much evidence, and I was overwhelmed. I brought a friend of mine, Jesse, there one day, and as soon as we got out of the car, we heard this wood knock that almost sounded like a gunshot. That's how strong and hard and fast they hit this tree. And we're like, "Oh my God." So we started investigating there with the homeowner, and he decided that he wanted to make friends with these creatures, and he started making sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly, and he'd buy honey buns, and he would put them in Ziploc baggies and nail them to the fence that's right behind the creek from his house. And so every night he would, around 4 o'clock, he would put them out there, and then the next day come out and they'd be gone. And then we'd go in the woods and look for the bags, and they would be slit open. Not, it's almost like somebody had a knife and slit them open, not like a bird or a raccoon or anything. So it just got more and more things started happening. And yeah, I told him, "Don't feed them," because then one time he went away because he had to go to the city for a funeral, and he was gone for a couple of days, and they got angry because he wasn't feeding them, and they took all of his furniture on his deck and like threw it around. And they probably were saying, "Oh, where is he? You didn't feed us." And so so then I started posting different evidence on my Facebook page, and a gentleman from Massachusetts saw all these posts and all this evidence of tracks and all this stuff, and he offered to come up, and he had a FLIR camera, which we didn't have. They're very expensive night
Yeah.
vision. So the homeowner agreed to let these two men come and investigate with us. So they came, and it was still light out. It was December 30th, 2014. So we did a walk around and, showed them the lay of the land. It was freezing cold that day. And so then the homeowner had us come in and sit down, had something to eat with, and we waited for it to get dark. So the one gentleman and I were facing the windows in the kitchen, and all of a sudden we see this shadowy figure walk by, a light colored. And he's like, "Did you see that?" And I said, "Yes." Oh God. So we hurried and got our gear on and get all your camera equipment and everything. And I stepped out on the porch first while the guys were still gearing up. As soon as I stepped out on the porch, we hear crack, splat into the pond. A tree went down. So I'm like,
Wow.
hurry up, guys. They're throwing down trees. So everybody's like all excited, and we start heading down. And so the man with the camera was, just like panning. And then he said, contact, contact. So he had them on video, and it was FLIR. So you're not going to, you'll see the heat signatures. And there were five of the Sasquatch, and there were five of us. So he was passing the camera to everyone so they could see what he was seeing at the time. When he handed it to me, I'm lefty and I did something wrong. Plus, it was freezing cold, and I accidentally turned it off for that few seconds.
Mm.
Then they started breaking like trees, like 20 something inches in diameter, like they were a twig. And so I said, guys, we got to get out of here. So we turned to go, and the man with the camera got hit with infrasound, which is that low vibrational frequency. It like spun him around and he was sick. So I'm trying to help him up to the house. I'm like, "Okay, we better get up there. They're really angry now." And the other two or three guys were still facing the creek when all of a sudden this blue light shot up in the sky and dead silence. And it was eerie, to say the least. And I mean, I knew before that there was something like outer worldly, or I'm not going to paranormal or interdimensional or whatever you want to call it. They're not just a dumb big ape in the woods. They have intelligence more than we could even realize. And but that instant when that happened, it just blew our minds. And so, we got him up into the house. He was dizzy and, nauseous and everything. It took a while for him to come out of it. And then we were like, let's have the chip, let's put the chip in. So we started watching, and we're like amazed that he captured them on this video camera. And they were angry because they don't like cameras at all. They don't want to be discovered. So we all made a pact that night because the homeowner kind of insisted. He was very protective of them, and he didn't want to compromise their location. So we all said, no, we won't share it, which to this day, this is going back from 2014, I believe. I
Wow.
have not shared, I respect his wishes. So yeah, that was a life-changing encounter for sure.
Yeah. And when you talk about the light going up, was this like a searchlight, or was this like an orb?
No,
Like how
just
did
like
what did it
a
look like?
blue flash. I was facing the house with the man that was sick. So I didn't personally see it, and he didn't, but the other three men did. And they said it was just this blue light, just whoosh, and dead silence.
Hmm.
Just, it was weird. And the weirder thing is the following night was New Year's Eve, and the homeowner had a girlfriend. And so they decided to go out for New Year's, which they did. When they came back home, they pulled in the driveway, got out of the vehicle, looked around because he has a big property. And he said, Gail, there were 30 sets of eye shine, all like some low, some high in the trees, on the ground, all around his property. They ran in the house. They got the shotgun. They couldn't sleep. They were like worried, because they compromised the location or whatever. And these things can be like revengeful. So after that, like the next morning, the girl said, take me home. And she never came back again. I would never even, like, I've been out there at night, just me and the homeowner crossing the creek, and we call that the dead zone because we would find like different bones of, deer and different animal bones and stuff. And I've had like sticks thrown at me and little rocks, not to hurt you, but, just to let you know that they're there. And uh, I've learned a lot over the years, and I don't do a lot of night investigations anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And do you still speak with this homeowner? Is he still experiencing
Um,
things or?
he put the house on the market, and I don't know, if he sold it or not, but I haven't really seen him in quite some time. But yeah, I wouldn't sleep there. You couldn't pay me enough money. It's not just the Bigfoot, there's other things there as well. So it's kind of out on the far left, but we've gotten video, like we put up trail cameras and we got this picture. It's a set of three pictures of the trail cam. Up in a tree was this little creature, and it was raising its arm up and down. I've shared it on different sites before, and it's blurry. And, I've stared at it so many times, but someone said it could be what's called a puckwudgie.
Hmm.
And yeah, and so I've done research on them. Yeah, there's all kinds of weird things there. I don't know what it is about the land, or, it's just, I could never sleep there. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I mean the woods. I mean, I give you props for doing a solo camping trip because that's something that I plan to do soon, but it's something I've never done before. And it's you talk to people who've never been in the woods, who've never they'll go camping on a family campground or whatever. But when you go deep in the woods, you start having experiences.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know. I'm not saying they're paranormal. I'm not saying they're from outer space or they're ghosts or whatever they are, but
Right.
you go into the woods and you spend enough time in the woods, you will start hearing and seeing and experiencing
Yeah.
weird things. And not every time, but
Mm.
you go deep enough and it's that quiet and it's almost, and I don't know what it is. For me, I always speculate that it's just getting away from the city, getting away from your phone and
Right.
electronics and TV. Your brain is just more perceptive to maybe what's out there. And
Yes.
I mean, I've heard voices in the woods when there's no people there. I've seen
Yeah.
lights in the woods when there should be no lights. Like it's very
Yeah.
subtle experiences, but you
Yeah.
get out there enough, and it's not every trip. Most of my trips out there, nothing happens, but every now and then you get a little weirdness
Right.
happens. And yeah, the puckwudgies are interesting because
Yeah.
you hear a lot about Bigfoot and Sasquatch and stuff like that, but you don't really hear much about like little people of the
Right.
woods,
Right.
puckwudgies, or but these are all in folklore. We have leprechauns, we have fairies, we have
Exactly.
gnomes and trolls and things like that. So
Right.
it must come from somewhere. So that's
Yeah. I read a statement that said, when the legend becomes truth, print the legend. And it's like, yeah, the Native Americans, for example, I mean, they used to trade with the Sasquatch way, way back in the day. And, there's so many pictographs with Sasquatch all over the country, all over the world. Every country has their version of a Sasquatch, Yeti, and there's tons of different names for them. But the native people are a little bit more reserved about talking about them. I don't know. Some people, some of them will, but some, they just want to keep that kind of their own thing. But
right.
they're having experiences as well, on the reservations all out west and stuff. And some of them are very, very bad because they're killing their livestock and, carrying off, family pets they're killing. And, they don't like aggressive dogs. Luckily, my two dogs are not, a threat to them. And I raise chickens here, which I free range, and I have doves, and they have never like harmed anything. I used to have rabbits and stuff, and like I respect them and they respect us.
Hmm.
But I know so many other people that like contact me. This person in Corning, New York, where I sent you the audio,
Yeah, I'm
and
gonna pull that up actually so we can
yeah,
play that. But yeah, go ahead.
well, the man, the family had been living in this house for quite some time, and evidently the Amish people were started cutting trees above where these people lived, and it angered the Sasquatch, and they were taking it out on these poor people. and they saw the big male. They said it was at least 10 feet tall. It traumatized the children. And I couldn't get up there, and I don't know what I'd actually do to help them, you know. So, yeah, that was a scary one.
So is that the audio clip you sent me? That's connected to this case?
There's two audio clips. The other one is
Was
from
from
Brighton Hyde Park.
Height, right? So
Yeah.
let me play the Corning one first because
Okay.
I think these are really interesting. So let me just find. So I think this is it. So I'm just going to play this,
Okay.
and hopefully it's loud enough. Uh, that's a weird sound.
Oh,
That's a
yeah.
I don't know
The
what would make
lung
that.
capacity is like, it's amazing how long and loud it is. I mean, this thing was running around their house, just howling and carrying on. The family was so afraid they wouldn't even go outside at night, of course. And then I think the 8-year-old son had seen it. And the father's like, well, what can we do? And I said, well, we recommend that you get motion lights and put them all around your house. Um, Put up trail cameras or ring doorbell camera. But if they were revengeful towards this poor family that didn't cut the trees down, it was someone else. So I reached out to a woman in Texas that specializes in problem cases. And I think I put her in touch with the family, and she might have had a different perspective of, how to help them.
Hmm.
I mean, generally, you have to be respectful of them without like allowing them to invade your privacy. And she said that you should go out and talk to them and say, look, you're welcome to be in this woods, but this is my home, and you're frightening my children, and just talk to them basically.
Right, right. I'm going to play another howl too because this one was interesting for me because it's similar to this one from Corning, but
Hmm.
there's also an extra part at the end
Right.
which sounds similar to what I heard, not identical, but it's that guttural, that low guttural. So I'm gonna share that. And
Okay.
again, if you don't hear it, I'll um I'll edit it into the video later. But I'm gonna play this one right now. But
Right.
there's a first part that sounds very similar to the Corning, just
Hmm.
this high kind of pitched yell,
Right.
and then it's silent for a few minutes, and then you hear this real guttural
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah.
And it's freaky and even though the first two parts I could almost imagine a human doing it, just like hooting and hollering, just that woo, but
Yeah.
again, like you're saying, it's when you're out, on audio, when you're listening back to it on a recording, it's hard to really gauge what you're hearing. You're hearing it, but how loud is it? How is it affecting you?
Oh,
um when you hear it in person and
yeah.
you're saying, okay, that's not an owl, that's not
Right.
a cat, that's not,
Right.
this is something, it's not a person. A person can yell really loud.
Hmm.
um but if this is coming from a mile away, you're not going to hear it that loudly. If this guy's two campsites over and hooting and hollering, it's going to sound kind of freaky, but you're
Yeah.
like, oh, he's 40 yards away.
Right.
um so yeah, very interesting howls.
Yeah.
And do you, when you record these, do you try to go online and see if you can match them up to known animals in the area?
I
uh
have. I mean, I've hunted, I was a deer hunter, pheasant, duck. I've spent a lot of time in the woods. I've, seen animals' behavior and heard them. And, there was nothing that could match either one of those, except for the thing I heard the night when I was a teenager. It was it blew my mind. And I had no idea because we didn't have television. We got two channels back then. We had a
Hmm.
party line. I mean, it was back in the late 60s. I'm giving away my age here, but anyway, yeah. So I had no reference. There was like, I could relive it. Like every time I talk about it, I thought I was going to die. I actually thought I'm going to die. So it was the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. And I don't, even that night with the blue light and the five of them breaking those trees, I did not have the fear that I had the night when I was alone in the woods. So, and we didn't have guns with us at the man's house. Because Bigfoot, of course, don't like guns and they don't like cameras, and you just don't want to aggravate them in any way. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So you mentioned this one experience with this light, and you
Mhm.
mentioned that you sort of feel like there's more to Sasquatch than just a big dumb ape sort of
Oh
thing.
yeah,
Have you investigated a lot of cases where there's something else? Because again, we hear a lot of Bigfoot reports where it's just it seems like a large primate, and it's pulling fish out of a river, or it's carrying a deer, or it just
right,
seems like a flesh and blood
right.
primate. But then you have other stories where there's other aspects that are harder to explain. So do you get a lot of reports where there's this extra sort of thing that makes you believe that this is more than just an ape?
Well, I'm going to tell you one that my friend Bruce just told me. I mean, he told me about it, and it happened, I think, a year ago, and that was up in let's see, overlook a mountain in the Catskills. So they were bushwhacking. It was he and another friend, and he's an avid hiker, and so they always would go off trail. So they were trying to get up to the peak of the mountain, and it took a while to get, they were off trail and bushwhacking. And Bruce was in front, and his friend was in the rear, and they just crested. Right before they crested the top, he looked up and sees this creature, this Bigfoot. And he's like, and then his friend saw it. And he's like, we just saw Bigfoot. We just saw Bigfoot. And he said it was so fast. He said no human being could run that fast and, in all the weeds and branches and brambles. And it just, like in a second or two, it was gone, and he heard it, running away. But they have abilities like, oh, I'll tell you another story from Hyde Park area. This was 2 years ago. A young woman called me freaking out. She was working as a gardener for these wealthy people, and she had weeded their garden. And the woman said, well, go behind the barn, you'll see a trail and you can dump the weeds there. So she had the wheelbarrow full, and and it was in the summertime and in the middle of the day. And so she went and dumped the weeds. And I guess the wheelbarrow, when she dropped the wheelbarrow, it made a loud noise. And this Bigfoot must have been sleeping or something about 50 yards away, jumps up, comes crashing towards her, like, putting all the bushes out of its way. And she just froze. She couldn't move. And it jumped up in the tree above her and it started swinging from tree to tree. She saw the whole back of the creature as it was swinging. And she said it was a reddish brown color, and it had its legs like tucked up, and it was just swinging from tree to tree. And she, like, lost it. I mean, she was very scared. And
Wow.
this is in the middle of the afternoon in Hyde Park, New York. I mean, it's just, they can be wherever they want. And like a lot of encounters happen at night. But like when she caught this one off guard, and when it heard that noise, it startled it. And when it saw it was a woman, thank God it didn't, like grab her and take her off somewhere. But it was terrifying for her. definitely. So,
Wow.
I mean, you never know. You never know where they're going to be.
And do you get many more nighttime encounters or daytime, or do you feel like it's evenly sort of?
Yeah, I think it's about even. I've got so many. These fishermen, I live on the Sawkill Creek, and it's a tributary to the Hudson River.
Hmm.
So there's a recreation park where the kids have their baseball field and um, swing sets, and they have fishing tournaments. And so there's two roads, and there's like a U. So these two friends of mine were fishing, and this was back in the 80s, I think 86 or something. And so they were going fishing, and they had their tackle box and their poles, and they were walking from Apple Ring Road to Fruit Bud Lane through the trail, along the creek. And this huge blonde colored Sasquatch just stepped out on the trail and was like, yeah. And they just dropped everything and ran. And they're like, Gail, we told people nobody would believe us. We left our stuff there. We didn't even go back for it. I mean, this is in the broad daylight too. So, and then there was another sighting of a blonde colored Sasquatch about not even a half a mile from the man's house with the blue light. And one of my team members, Michael Patrick, was driving past there. There's a little bridge, and drives up the road maybe a quarter of a mile. And in the field, someone was selling a motorboat. And he happened to look over, and there's this blonde Sasquatch standing in front of the motorboat. So he called me the next morning. He's like, Gail, and this was 11 p.m. at night. So my son and I went over there, and sure enough, exactly where he said, we cast a track of think about 18 inches.
Wow.
And it took off. Like he tried to pull his car, to see where it went, and it just gone. So it's just such a fleeting sightings, but yet it changes your life. It changes the way you look at, the forest, or look at anything that you've been told there's no such thing as monsters or boogeymen. But then when you come face to face with them, it's like, okay, my parents have lied to me. uh,
And I think it's interesting that you're mentioning many different colors. You mentioned like black and brown and gray and
yeah.
now like blonde.
Mhm.
And that's something that's been in the record for a long time. People, they're not always the same color. It's not always just a brown or a black. It's you get the grays, you get the white, you get the blonde,
Yeah.
which is fascinating to
Reddish.
me. The reddish, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, they're like people because their DNA, the mitochondrial DNA, is human, and the nuclear DNA is unknown. So, that's something that Mel Bekacham has proven
mhm.
in her, a long time ago, and everyone gave her all this slack, and, the scientific community, there was no peer review, and they didn't believe her. And you know what? She was right. They were wrong. So I respect her. And Ron Moorhead and Scott Carpenter, David Paulides. I mean,
Mhm.
these are like awesome people. We're all like trying to figure out, what are they? Where are they from? What's their agenda? Are they here to help us, help humanity? Some of the native people think that when the earth is in times of trouble, that they will come more and more and allow themselves to be seen more and more. So we know the earth is in trouble, that's for sure. So
Yeah.
that could be a reason.
Yeah, definitely. I
Yeah.
do think it's interesting the because again, I try to give the skeptical point of view.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
it's share as well, and
Yes.
sometimes I play devil's advocate. Um, for me, like one of the more interesting things is the like we just mentioned the biological differences. Like you said, it's not if someone has you mentioned Bigfoot to somebody, 99.9% of people are going to think of Patty. They're going to think of this
Right.
big, bulky, brown ape-like creature, but
Right.
that's not what a lot of people see. You know, you go down south and they're thinner, they're shorter, they're
Right.
more aggressive. You know, they're more
Yes.
like chimpanzees or orangutans.
Right.
They're more live, you know. And then yeah, you go to the Pacific Northwest and they're these big, bulky, hulking sort of
Mm.
things. And then yeah, here in New York, they seem to be a mix of that. They're taller, they're bulky, they're not as bulky as
Right.
Pacific Northwest, but they're not as small and kind of they're not like the swamp creatures of
Right.
Texas or Oklahoma or you know the grass man, things like that. You know,
Right.
it's just weird how you know why would people, if they have this sort of image of what a Bigfoot should be,
Hmm.
why do they keep seeing things that are different,
Right.
and not just different but sort of appropriate to the climate? It's just
Yes.
very, it's very interesting to me. And then yeah, you're seeing these different colors. I mean, some people say
Yeah.
there's like silverback
Yeah. I've heard
Sasquatch.
had one with a white streak going all the way from its head down its back. I mean, just something that I've researched online where somebody said, yeah, I saw one that was white, a streak through the body. So they're, they're different, just like we are. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
looks different. And yeah, it's amazing. And then we've got other, I've had a lady in Highland, New York, a couple of years ago that was being tormented, and she was wanting to get this on, television. I mean, she was seeing these red eye shine. I don't know if I sent you. I tried to send you a bunch of pictures, but she got video and pictures of these glowing eyes looking in her window, and she was really being tormented at night. And so, we were going there and investigating a lot. And she ended up, unfortunately, having a stroke and ended up in a nursing home. But oh, yeah, there's
Yeah,
the,
I'm sorry, I'm trying to
that's okay.
trying to
Yeah,
pull
that
things up
was
for you.
actually, I don't know if you know the actor Jeremy Davidson. He's married to Mary Stuart Masterson.
Oh, okay.
And he actually spotted, because he was very interested in the Sasquatch, and he came out a few times with me, and he spotted the carcass and the farm. So he was all excited, and we're like, let's bring some bones home. And we took the skull and a few leg bones, but we didn't take the whole thing. But yeah, that was unbelievable to find that.
Yeah, so there's a
Yeah,
picture of
there's the
you,
skull. Yeah.
the skull. And I'm going to put this on the website for anybody listening. I know some people watch on YouTube, and
Mhm.
of course the visuals are here, but if you're listening on a podcast, I'll put this on the website so everybody can see.
Nice.
Um, I'm trying to see how I can advance the photo here. I don't know if I can. So
Yeah, that was quite a find.
yeah, and I'm trying to find some footprints because I know you took some really interesting.
Yeah.
So let me pull this one up because this one I feel like is interesting. So that's definitely, I mean, you can see
Oh, yeah.
just from the cast, that looks like a large human footprint.
Yeah.
So very interesting there.
Yeah.
And
That was actually in a nature preserve. That track was, and there's a lot of activity. People always ask me, well, where should we go to find Bigfoot? And I never want to tell them the exact location, but I just say go to a park or a
mhm.
nature preserve. Oh, that one, yeah, that was our biggest, craziest thing. Even Coast to Coast AM picked that story up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the poor kid, Ryan, his mother was away. I mean, I'm calling him a kid, but he's, in college, and he was staying alone in the house. And this is the same road that there was a daytime sighting of a Bigfoot grabbing a bag that was in the middle of the road, and I guess it had cereal in it or something. And another college student saw this creature in his rearview mirror run out, pick up the bag, grab the box of cereal, and run off into the woods. So finding Bigfoot, where they went to Patterson, New York, and he interviewed the boy, and they didn't find any tracks or anything. So this is like right up the road. from where that sighting was, and the boy was sleeping. And the house is a big house, and they have a pond and lots of woods, I think 15 acres or so of land, and a farm next to them. And he hears something bang, bang on the side of the house, right where his bedroom was. So he got pretty scared. And I don't even know, I guess the next morning when he went outside, he saw this whole trackway, and he contacted us, and we went out, and sure enough, we got evidence, like so many tracks, and they were the biggest, I forget how many inches, but close to 30 inches. Yeah,
Hmm.
there's the trackway. They were up on his porch, came down off the porch, ran. This is going down towards that's the front of the house. The ponds in the back, they were all over the ice, and oh God. Then we found tree structures in the back by the pond. So many things.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
They
again, bear would be hibernating this time of year, so
right.
you can't throw it out as bear tracks.
No, no,
And so
no, not
very
at all.
and then there was one more photo that you had sent me. Let me pull it up because I mean, you sent me a lot of stuff, but
Oh yeah, I don't know. I kept sending them like this will be the last one, and I kept doing it.
but this one I want to talk about because this
Oh yeah.
is very interesting, and this is one of those photos where you're looking at it and it
Yeah.
it's very clear
Yeah,
that
that was not taken by me. I can't take credit for it, but it was a man in Rochester, New York, who had, would take his walks and whatnot, and he started finding evidence of Sasquatch tracks and tree structures. And he, we became friends, and he took that picture. And there's a picture that he sent me before that one where he must have like been walking and the creature was laying down sleeping.
mm-hmm.
And so the first picture was when the thing was like halfway up, and then that one. And I said, well, that's the one, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
and this is
classic. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
for anybody
awesome.
listening, this is clearly just a large dark figure. It looks like a head, no neck,
No neck.
shoulders,
Mhm.
and it's one of these things where it's either a hoax, it's either uh, just the way the woods look, but it doesn't look like there would be anything back there. I mean, I doubt he
Right,
would take a picture of a tree stump,
right.
or it's the
No,
real
he
thing.
saw it
So
move. I mean,
yeah,
he saw it get up. And I should have sent you the other picture before that, because it was just like trying to get up, and it was looking right at him. He's like, click, hi. Yeah, you don't know, they're not all fuzzy teddy bears, and you have to be careful, and you have to respect them.
right, right,
This is when we go out, we usually bring sage, Native American sage, and smudge the whole team, holy water, Jesus cross, and we ask permission to enter. And I think that's important because, it's like someone walking into your living room uninvited,
right,
all of a sudden night, so you have to be respectful of them, definitely.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so before we wrap up, I had a few more questions for you. So there was
Okay.
one, and I meant to comment on this post. It was a while back, but you had posted something on your Facebook page, which I will put down in the description so everybody can find you.
Okay.
But it was about horses and the
Oh,
manes
yeah.
being braided. And I've heard about this before, and I saw your post on it, and I wanted to ask you about it. And it was one of those things I was probably at work and said, "Oh, I'll go back to it later." And here
Yeah.
we are 6 months later, and I have, but now I have a chance to ask you about that. So, what do you think that is? Because I have heard of this before, where people leave their horses out, and the horse is out in the field, and it's gone for a few days, and it comes back, and there's like
Yeah.
clear, it's not that it's
Yeah.
tangled or matted; it's like clearly braided. So,
Yes.
what do you
Well,
think that's about?
that was, I think that might have been the one in Highland but there was another case of it after that. So there's been two reported cases to me, different farms.
Hmm.
But the one in Highland, I think she and her mom were riding on this trail, and they got this odor, this horrible smell, and then the horses started getting all crazy, and the mother's horse like started to rear, and so they turned, I guess, turned around, but they saw in the distance a Bigfoot creature. And so they went back to the barn, and then she sent me pictures of like her property and all these deer carcasses which were piled up, like just the bones behind the barn. And then she sent me the pictures of the braiding the mane. And so I had spoken to Melba a while ago. Melba Catcham has horses, and she has Sasquatch on her land. And she said, yes, that they will braid the mane of horses. And so I got so much slack from people. They're like, oh, a horse isn't going to stand still for, something that big and smelly to be braiding their mane and everything. But I've gotten two reports from New York, and then there's people out west that are saying, yes, that this happens. And, so, I mean, I would think that the horses would be frightened, but maybe at night, if the Bigfoot don't harm them and they like them, maybe they will allow them to do it. Or maybe they have no choice. They're so terrified, maybe that they can't, like when I was frozen in fear, maybe that's the way the horses get, and they just can't move and they just let them do it. Yeah, that was quite interesting. I've had two cases of that.
Yeah, and it's a weird
Yeah.
phenomenon. Again, it's not something you hear a lot of, but I heard about it prior to your posting,
Yeah.
and it's just one of those things again where it's like there's only a few something that's braiding has to have hands and opposable
Right.
thumbs.
Exactly.
So it comes down to hoax, it comes down to a person in the woods doing this to someone's horse, or it comes down
Yeah.
to Bigfoot.
Right.
So it's and again, one of those mysteries, like why, if
Yeah.
Bigfoot's doing it, why would they do it? If it was a hoax, like why is somebody just out in the woods braiding
Right.
horsehair?
Middle
It's
of
a
the night. Yeah.
middle of the night. It's a
Yeah.
weird thing. So
Yeah.
very
There's
strange.
so much to learn. I mean, I've been doing it for probably 12 years researching, and you think you know something, and then you'll hear or have an experience that totally blows your mind. And it's a quandary. We just have to keep boots on the ground, and keep an open mind, because so many people, like whenever I share something, I get certain people that are 100%, yeah, this is what it is. And then other people, oh, what have you been drinking? And making all funny emojis and different things. But like, I didn't know about them either when it happened to me years ago. So people, if they're not interested in this subject, you wouldn't know all the ins and outs of it, I guess.
And I think it's a lot. It's easy for a lot of people to just deride and make fun.
Right,
And like I was saying earlier, you have people who've never been out in the woods, who've never interviewed
right,
witnesses, who've never gotten out of the city or gotten out of away from their technology, and they're
right,
trying to tell people what is out there. And it's like, well,
right.
you've never been out there. You don't know what it's like to be miles and miles into the woods away from civilization and realize just how vast
Yeah,
nature is and how something could hide. And I've said this on the podcast before too, when I go camping, like my buddy Josh will be like, hey Jay, I'm going to go look for firewood. And within 10 seconds, I can't see him anymore.
yeah.
And he's
Oh,
right
yeah.
there. Like I can hear him
Right,
moving around, but I can't see him,
right.
just because of the brush. And it
Mhm.
just people, oh, something that big couldn't hide. And it's like, well, we're both like 6'1" and 200 pounds. Like if
Right,
Josh can hide from me 10 feet from me or
right.
20 feet from me, like, yeah, of course one of these things could hide,
Yeah,
10 yards, 20 yards away and never be seen.
yeah.
And
They're stealthy, and they can see really good at night. I had an in February 2015, maybe. I was out on my front porch, and it overlooks the creek and a farmer's field. And it was winter, so there was snow on the ground. And I was out there with my cat, and I looked across the field, across the creek onto the field, and see two huge, green, grown, big creatures with green, glowing eyes
wow.
walking down from the creek, and I yelled, I'm like, who's over there? And whoosh, gone in a split second. And I was like, God, I mean, they were big and their eye shine was like green LED lights, two
Wow.
sets of them. And that kind of unnerved me a little bit. I used to not be afraid of being out there, but then after I saw them, when I'd have to go out at night to close up my chickens or something, I was like, oh, Matt or Gary, watch, I'll be right out there, with the big flashlight and maybe a shotgun or something. But now I've gotten over it. I mean, if they wanted to harm me, they could have easily done it anytime. So
Right, right.
I've just, I'm okay with it now. But yeah, you go
Um,
through these different phases, I guess. Of,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So another thing, and I just kind of glossed over this a little bit, but I wanted to ask you about hoaxing. Like you've been doing this a long time now. You've interviewed tons of people.
Mhm.
Have you ever come across anybody that you felt was just trying to pull a fast one, trying to waste your time, trying to maybe saw something they thought was Bigfoot or well, that's misidentification. I just want to stick to hoaxing. Do you ever feel like anybody purposely
No,
tries to mislead you?
I never really did. I mean, interviewing the people, like I've had people call me at 4 o'clock in the morning that just had a sighting out in their driveway in New Paltz, New York, and like was freaking out. I mean, I believed him. And then we went and investigated there and found tracks and structures. Like this is a college town
Hmm.
near the rail trail. I've gotten other reports from that area. But, you can tell by they have nothing to gain by lying and making a story up. But, I asked them certain questions and, basically, I don't think I've ever had anyone like, try to make anything up. No. Mm-mm.
Yeah, interesting. And again, it's one of those things that the skeptics will always point to and just say people are lying, people are, but again, I mean, like you mentioned earlier with Poughkeepsie and
Yeah,
some of your other stories that people don't want their names used. We talked about this off air too. Like,
right,
we don't want to use real names or last names or give exact locations because
right.
uh not because you're trying to be territorial or trying to be secretive about your research, but it's these people don't want notoriety. They don't want their names out there. They're not trying to write books and sell
Right.
movie rights and they saw something, they're scared. And again, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that every single one of these was absolutely Bigfoot. Of course, I'm sure some of them are misidentifications or just someone being scared.
Mhm.
That's going to happen. Um, Especially people who aren't familiar with the woods. I mean, you take a city dweller and bring them out in the woods and they hear one of these owls or a fisher or a fox, and they're going to be like, oh my God,
Right.
a woman's being murdered over there. And
Oh,
no,
yeah,
it's just a
yeah,
fox, it's,
yeah.
so I'm sure there are misidentifications, but the clear hoaxes, um, I don't really like that explanation most of the time because it's
Right,
why hoax something if there's no payoff. A
right,
hoax should have a payoff. Either you're getting money or you're fooling a friend or
right,
you're
right.
scaring someone, so why are these footprints found a mile long trackway in
Yeah,
the middle of nowhere where somebody may never have even stumbled upon them?
right,
It's a lot of effort for very little return. And then even if
right.
it is someone finding them, it's not their friend. It's some
Yeah,
random person out in the woods. And where's that emotional payoff to hoax someone? I mean, a hoax is basically a prank. And if you're pulling a
right.
prank on someone, you're trying to
Yeah,
get that reaction out of them and you
right.
kind of laugh at yourself and I got you, I got you.
Yeah, yeah,
So, where's the gotcha moment for most of
right,
these? And again, I'm not saying hoaxes don't happen, but for skeptics to kind of write all of this off as it's just someone wasting your time or someone
right,
like you're saying, why would someone call you, invite you out to their property, and then say, don't tell anybody about this, don't tell
right.
them my name or my address or
Mm-hmm.
and please take it down from your website. It's just
Yeah,
it's very interesting to me.
yeah, yeah.
So
No, they have nothing to gain. I mean, really, I would never use their name or exact location anyway. I mean, that's something that, I honor the person's wishes. And I always ask, is it okay if I share it? Because if I do, it's going to be, I don't share everything that I have. I mean, some things that are just too too out there to even talk about. So I keep a lot in, but I have so many encounter stories like people have taken to the grave. This one of I'll just close with this story.
Okay, cool.
A woman and her parents back in the 50s were going to the movies in Millerton, New York, which they were lived in Pine Plains where I grew up. So it's 199 into Millerton. And and it was in the 50s, and both of them saw this Bigfoot, what they didn't even know what it was back then, walking on the side of the road. And they looked at each other, did you see that? Yes, did you? Yep. They both swore to each other they will never mention it to anyone. And so I guess the mother died first, or the father, one of them died, whoever died first, the other one on their deathbed told their daughter what they saw. And their daughter reached out to me and said, Gail, I want to share this with you. You're welcome to, publish, put it out there. And I was like, thank you so much. I mean, that just gives me confirmation, for my own encounter and others that have told me that they've seen things in that area. So, yeah, so some people will take it to the grave,
Yeah.
basically, rather than, tell. So I felt honored that, she did share that with me.
Yeah, and those are always great stories for me because it's
Yeah,
why would you, if you know
yeah,
you're going to die, why are you saying, yeah, this is what I saw?
right.
There's no question, and I just want it known before I pass that
Yeah,
um why, if you're faking something, or why not just admit it at a certain
right.
point? Bob Gimlin, he could right now, he could make $1 bajillion selling his story and saying, yeah, we faked the whole thing.
Oh,
He's not
gosh.
doing it. He's making peanuts going to these conventions, but that's about
Right.
it. He'd make so
Yeah.
much more money
Oh, yeah.
just being like, yeah, it was a hoax and here's how we did it. But he
He's
won't.
genuine.
Yeah.
I haven't met him, but I follow him and Russell Accord
Hmm.
and, all of them. So I'd like to meet him someday.
Yeah, me too. I can't afford to go to all the conventions. They're always, I mean, I'm a New
Either.
York City guy, so
Yeah. Did you go to Whitehall though?
I've passed through it.
Okay.
Um, I camp a lot up in the Adirondacks.
Hey,
So I've been all over there. The last trip home, actually, when Josh was driving us back to his house, he was like, "I'm going to go this way, and we'll go down past Whitehall." So, but we were
yeah.
too tired. It was like a 6 mile hike out from our lean-to, so we were just like,
Gosh.
"We'll just try." And you smell like campfire and
Right,
just
right.
dirty and smelly. So we were just like, but it was like, oh, there's Whitehall, and we are planning a trip where I'm going to go up there with him, and we'll do like all the museums up there. There's like an Adirondack museum, but I'd love to go to like Whitehall and just.
Well, and
Um,
September they have the big festival.
mhm.
And we went this year and set up, and our booth was the busiest booth. I did not get to see Steve Culls or Paul Bartholomew or any of the guys because I have all this Bigfoot merchandise now, and we were just swamped the whole day.
Wow, that's great.
So that was good. So
Yeah.
next year, God willing, I'll be there again.
Yeah, I hope
And,
to get up next year. This year was September is a little crazy for me, and I just couldn't make it. So
yeah,
I do hope to get up there next year, but
yes.
I would love to get
Yeah,
to Whitehall. But yeah, your stories are so cool, and we could probably
you.
talk for days about all your
Yeah,
stuff. And
I got a million more, but we can't do that.
no, no, but I'd love to have you back on at some point, and we can talk more Bigfoot stuff because I do like your page. I like all your stories, and I'd love to just pick your brain some more at a future date.
Well, that would be great with
Yeah.
me. I
But
appreciate you, and I'm wishing you a lot of success, and I will share this on my page.
thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm going to put links in the description so people can find your Facebook page and contact you if they have any stories. And yeah, we'll be talking soon. And I do hope to have you on again. This is awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gail. Take
Have a
care.
great evening.
You too.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye bye.
Bye.
All right, everybody. I want to thank Gayle Beatty for coming on the show. Awesome stories. And like I said, I've been following her Facebook page for a while now, and we've interacted a little bit in the past. And then I reached out to her some weeks ago, and she was busy, which I totally understand. It's that time of year. And so glad to have her on the show this week, especially with last week's show about stuff I heard in the Hudson River Valleys, and that's where she investigates. So awesome stories, awesome guest. I do want to have her on again. I'm going to put links to Gail's Facebook page, Bigfoot Researchers of the Hudson Valley, down below, so you can find her Facebook. You can contact her on there if you have stories, if you have questions. Please do. She's super sweet. I love Gail. I've been following her for years, and she's just great. I'm going to put my email address up here too if you guys want to share any of your stories or contact me for anything. It's jason@oddanduntold.com. And next week, I'm hoping to have some ghost stories from a haunted Airbnb in California. So stay tuned for that. Until then, it never does, my hand. Rock and roll, everybody. Stay tuned for Moonlight by Riversend. Awesome song, awesome outro, cool tune. And we'll see you next week.
Moonlight glowing, it fades on me and you, casting dancing shadows. The earth is draped in blue. Here in this moment, time is standing still. See